Good morning, everybody, again. We've spoken a lot about training, haven't we? It's a reoccurring theme over the last couple of days. So hopefully there's some question marks hanging above your head that we're going to be able to answer in this session this morning. You've seen this already. We've used this to explain how guidance fits in with the other elements of operational response. So just to reiterate, we all know it already, guidance, best practice is there in place to support services in developing their policies and procedures, and ultimately supports that safe person principles in the middle. But of course, guidance automatically informs training. That link is obvious, but at the moment what we have is we're producing good practice, services are producing or will be producing policies and procedures, and then you as policy officers are then asking your training departments to deliver training based on that. And there's a risk there that link, that line, we can open ourselves up to inconsistency. So what we aim to do in producing national training specifications is bring that consistency back, is set out exactly what your training needs to contain. And by training delivery, we're talking about your training departments, training providers that you use, training centres, so we can provide something to anyone involved in the sort of training landscape, if we call it that, so they can draw on that, and we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So you've seen this slide again. As I said, I've already spoken a lot about consistency, but that is one of the key aims of this project. So training specifications need to set out exactly what your training needs to contain. The knowledge, the underpinning knowledge and understanding, the performance criteria. But we feel that we need to draw the line before we go ahead and explain to you how you deliver that training. That is your jobs, or it's the jobs of your training providers. So we will give you enough information to support you in developing that training delivery. But we won't say, what methodology you need to use, what frequency your training should be given. We feel that that's down to you. But it'd be useful to hear back from you in the plenary session whether you agree with that or whether you feel that we could go a step further. So have a think about whether you think that's appropriate and whether we've got that right. And we're not just talking about training specifications here. We actually want to provide a system which you can use as a basis for any training arrangement. So all those organisations, all those bodies that contribute to the picture of training in development, in training delivery, in qualifications, in assessment, all of those elements can draw on the specifications, on the guidance, on national occupational standards, and it provides that basis that underpins it all. So it's all based on one strategic framework. Roy spoke earlier about professional qualifications. He spoke about how the IFE are referencing national operational guidance. It forms the content of their syllabus. So that link is already there. And we've got accreditation up here. We would like to hear from you whether you feel that accreditation of training courses and training delivery is something that you think would be beneficial. If it is, then let's have that conversation. I'm sure Roy's ears will be pricked up. It might be a role that he feels the IFE could step into. So let's have a conversation about whether that would be worthwhile for you, whether you feel that having courses where you know that they are consistent, you know that they're delivering what they say they're going to deliver, is that going to be useful to you? So have a think about that. So talking a bit more widely about engaging all of those organisations and bodies that I spoke about that contribute to that picture, we have a number of organisations here that we have been establishing links with. I've spoken about the Institute of Fire Engineers. We have a National Occupational Standards and Qualifications Group. Steve Buchanan-Lee is going to speak after me and Brin, a bit more about the work that we've been doing to align national occupational standards and national operational guidance. And of course, a number of groups here provide the governance around that. So the FRS Occupational Committee, Skills for Fire and Rescue provide the governance around those occupational standards. Representative bodies and the National Joint Council use those standards to build the role maps. Fire Professional Framework are linking to the guidance and will link to the specifications once they're published. We have Skills for Justice Awards, so they are also referencing the guidance, and the National Procurement Group will align to the training specifications as well. So the idea is that we make sure we've covered all bases. We've got every organisation and every body that contributes to the picture of training the fire sector are all linking back to the guidance, linking to the specifications, and ultimately linking it into the National Occupational Standards, so that you know that whichever route you choose in training your staff, whether that's by yourself as an individual fire and rescue service, whether that's using a provider, whether that's sending them to a training centre, whichever way you assess your staff, professional qualifications, using the occupational standards, we're all singing from the same song sheet. So looking a bit more closely about how these elements relate to each other, National Occupational Standards provide a broad outcome of what needs to be achieved. So it's high level, it's quite generic. It needs to be generic because it needs to be flexible for services to use, so it doesn't want to be prescriptive. But what the guidance does is it builds on that and it fleshes that out. So it says, this is how you achieve those outcomes. The training specifications then draw on that good practice and pull out the knowledge and understanding that you need and the performance criteria that needs to form part of your training. And scenarios, we've spoken quite a bit about scenarios already these few days. They draw on the tactics from the guidance. So by doing that, and the fact that the guidance is, the training specifications are linked to the guidance, there's a route from the scenarios through to the training specifications. And you might feel that the scenarios are a really useful tool for training. We've spoken about that already. If that's the case, it would be interesting to hear from you, whether that is the case, how much of a link you feel that's going to be, whether there's some further work that we can do in developing the training specifications to align that to the scenarios. So have a think about that. Again, talk to us about whether that's going to be useful for you. And finally, from me, this slide, I'm hoping, helps to visualise how the elements work together. So in the middle there, we have a depiction of the guidance framework. And the training specifications are directly derived from the elements of guidance. So they're actually linked in to each control measure, has training specification content. And Brin will go into a bit more detail about how those build up. So the occupational standards on the left here, we are working those links from the guidance into the standards. So we will be able to say, for every standard, which control measures deliver that outcome. And there'll often be a number of them because, as I say, they're broad and the guidance is a lot more specific. And you can imagine if to the right of this training specification is your training delivery. So you deliver the training, you're basing that on the training specifications, which is based on the guidance and then is linking through to those occupational standards. So you know that if you've covered all of the training specifications, you have delivered all of the guidance in your training and you have met all of the operational aspects, of course, of the occupational standards. So hopefully that helps you visualise how that's the strategic framework that can underpin your training. And if we use this system, we know that we've got all aspects covered, that we're doing it consistently, and we're doing it as best we can. So Brin's going to go into a bit more detail now about how those elements fit together, how we develop those things, and a bit of an example. So I'll hand over.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give you a little bit more detail about what Fay's already covered with regards to the training specifications. I'm going to talk a little bit about how those elements relate specifically, a little bit about the development process of the training specifications and how we aim to make them work for you with your obvious consultation, and a little bit about looking forward to what we can expect by 2018, okay, with regards to purely about the training specifications themselves. Okay, so as we all know, National Operational Guidance is compiled of a series of hazards and control measures. Okay, and the training specifications are directly derived from those hazards and control measures, okay, via the knowledge and the tactics. So we've got hazard knowledge and control measure knowledge, which will give us the knowledge and understanding, and we've also got the tactics, which will give us the performance criteria. On the other side of that, we've got the National Occupational Standards, and we feel that obviously that those links need to be clearly made. The National Operational Guidance is set up differently to how the National Occupational Standards is set out. Obviously, as Fay has said, the standards are quite broad and flexible, whereas the National Operational Guidance is quite specific. So what we have done is cross-mapped the National Operational Guidance to the standards, and those linkages are quite clear. Okay. So as we've said, if we follow the training specifications, we will be meeting the National Occupational Standards according to the operational aspects. Okay, the development process has been formulated for this. The guidance is produced with reference to the relevant National Occupational Standards. Then the training specifications themselves are produced in consultation with the relevant subject matter experts. So we're not saying we think that this is the best fit for you. We're approaching the right people. And an example of that is when we've produced the recent Incident Command training specifications, we did that in consultation with the National Command and Control User Group, and they've obviously got a vital part to play in that process. We can also, using the development process, make recommendations to the likes of the Sector Skills Council via the National Occupational Standards and Qualifications Group for changes to the National Occupational Standards themselves, according to what each and every individual Fire and Rescue Service thinks, obviously via the consultation, the National Implementation Forum process. And vice versa. The NOS and Quals group that Steve chairs, can make recommendations from the standards point of view as to what needs to go into National Operational Guidance as well. So it's that two-way communication. There's obviously a relevant consultation process, and that's something that we need to ask the group about for the future. Is the consultation process appropriate via the National Implementation Forum for the training specs, or do we need to consult with the relevant training providers and training managers? Would that be a different option? I mean, that's over to you. What would your recommendation be for that? Bearing in mind the links to the guidance as well. But via any consultation process, it would be subject to consultation and approvals via the comprehensive governance process that we already have in place through the Operational Guidance Group and the Operational Guidance Strategy Board. Okay, we feel that that is belt and braces for final sign-off for any of the training specifications. Okay, going specifically into the training specifications themselves, they will detail the knowledge and understanding, okay, which is derived from, as it says there, the hazard and control measure knowledge and associated foundation documents, all accessed via the UK FRS website or portal, via whatever means each and every fire and rescue service uses. And the performance criteria will be derived from the tactical actions contained within the guidance. Okay, so you can see what you need to know and understand and what you need to do at an incident. Okay. How is that configured? Well, as you've said, and I've sort of mentioned it a few times now, training specifications comprised of those two criteria, the knowledge and understanding and the performance criteria. Then we've got the National Operational Guidance. This is just to reiterate what I've already said. What is missing from that is those strategic actions, which are what a fire and rescue service should or must have in place. Okay. That will not form part of the training specifications. What will form part of the training specifications are the tactical actions. And the links there are quite clear. Hazard knowledge, control measure knowledge feeds the knowledge and understanding for the training spec, and the tactical actions feeds the performance criteria. What we've also got with a link to that, again via the UK Fire and Rescue Service website, is all of the foundation material. So all of the links within the guidance and the additional foundation material, such as, and you'll have all seen the incident command that Roy was talking about earlier. This is all linked via the website to the training specifications. How that works in practice. So this is in your packs. You should have the example of the incident command training specification. Looks like that. Got that? Just so you can follow it. Okay, on the first page of that document, we've got the knowledge and understanding part. Okay, and bearing in mind this isn't a finished article, and that's not the complete article. This is just an example for this session. We've got the knowledge and understanding, which we're going to focus on for this bit. Okay, and if we look at the second point down, that reaching a decision, understand the decision-making process. So you've got the control measure from the guidance, and you've got the learning outcome as an interpretation. The link will be to that specific learning outcome with a foundation for incident command, command decision making, reaching a decision. And a training provider, whether it be, as Fay mentioned earlier, through each and every individual fire and rescue service, internal training, or an external training provider, those are the elements that will need to be included for that particular part of that training specification within any theoretical training session for an incident commander. Okay. Then we've got the performance criteria, which you'll find on the third page, I believe. And we're going to look at that top control measure, which is selecting appropriate actions by applying the decision control process, very topical at the moment, to the information gathered, avoiding decision traps. Okay, that's your control measure. The learning outcome associated with that is for somebody to demonstrate effective use of the decision control process to assist intuitive and analytical decision making. Yeah. So what will somebody need to perform in order to demonstrate that? The link to that will be, okay, and it will be assessment via the joint decision model and the decision control process, and an assessment of demonstrable skills will be taken from the incident command guidance, those tactics from the incident command guidance. Okay. That is a précis of how the training specifications we feel will work for you, obviously subject to your consultation, to your feedback. Please let us know what you think. A little bit about what's coming next, or what we foresee. The delivery of the full suite of training specifications will be staggered until 2018. Obviously, we've still got guidance to produce in the meantime up until that point. But as and when new guidance is produced, a set of training specifications will be produced alongside it. Okay. And we're currently working on the current guidance to produce a full suite of training specifications, which will be subject to the relevant agreed consultation process. Okay. We're looking at, and as Fay mentioned earlier, the delivery aligned to the scenarios as well. So if you think about a scenario lined up with a training specification, you could then design training according to individual training requirements based on the training specifications. Okay. So you'll have a number of training specifications that you can pluck out and feed into a scenario to meet individual training requirements. Okay. And that's just one option or one variable that we can see being beneficial to the UK Fire and Rescue Service. Okay. I'm going to hand you back to Fay just to summarise what we've spoken about via the training specifications. Thank you very much. Thank you.